All right, good evening, everyone. Thank you for your patience. We're going to start our meeting now. So I'm going to call to order the Monday, October 14th, 2024 Royal Oak City Commission meeting to order. We're going to begin with an invocation given by Commissioner Macy, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. I ask that you stand if you can, please.
Last Saturday afternoon, the City Commission met with and interviewed candidates for our new city manager. While the city manager is a critical position and our choice will play a vital role in the future of Royal Oak, I have a feeling that many Royal Oakers were tuned into a baseball game in Cleveland at that time instead of the interviews. And I do understand the draw. The Tigers went on a storybook run that captivated the whole region. They were a reminder of the power of sports to unite people across divides. People of all backgrounds can share in the joy that was watching Kerry Carpenter's home run in Game 2 or Andy Ibanez's double against the Astros. Came home from the interviews on Saturday in time to see the Tigers' magical run end. But the flagging spirits at my house on Saturday were lifted on Sunday. We saw again the power of sports to change the mood, with the Lions' dominant win in Dallas. Playoff baseball may be over for us, but it certainly feels like playoff football will be back in Detroit for the second year in a row. And punctuating all the sports that fill our home these days are the endless political ads. The juxtaposition is a good reminder. In the heat of a contentious political campaign, it can be hard to find what we have in common with people who support another candidate. But know that whoever you're voting for president, literally millions of their supporters are probably rooting for the Yankees. So whatever coalition you're in, you're working with tons of people with terrible judgment. I joke, obviously, but I'm well aware that the stakes in politics are serious, very serious for many people. I don't want to diminish in any way what's at stake in this upcoming election. But the day after the election, or whenever a winner is declared, we in Royal Oak will still be grocery shopping, going to restaurants, walking our dogs, and raking our leaves, alongside plenty of people who didn't vote the way we did. And while we should never be afraid to hold our elected leaders responsible, we should remember that we remain neighbors with people who voted differently. We are a community that spans many divides, and we embrace the opportunity to live, work, play, and grow together. And then the Sunday after the election, the Lions will play on Sunday Night Football in Houston, and we as a city and a region will be able to cheer together with another opportunity to defeat a team from Texas, something that we can all agree can be celebrated. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Commissioner Macy. That invocation was a home run. And I appreciate the football analogy so I could keep along and follow along. Thank you so much. All right. That brings us to item 4 tonight, which is the approval of the agenda. Commissioner Colo. A motion by Commissioner Colo, seconded by Commissioner Cheatham. Discussion on the agenda. All right, with none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, motion passes. We've established an agenda. Next up is public comment. The City Commission values and relies on the input of our fellow citizens to help make decisions. Now is the time set aside for the public to address the City Commission on any city-related issue, whether or not it's on the agenda. I ask that comments be directed to the Commission as a whole and not to individual commissioners. If you wish to speak tonight at public comment, please wait until recognized by me, the mayor, and come up to the podium. For the record, we ask that you state your name and address. Please be mindful the City Commission wishes to hear from anyone who wants to speak tonight, so comments are limited to 3 minutes per person, not per topic. And there's a timer at the podium to help keep track of your allotted time. If you don't wish to speak tonight, please don't hesitate to send us your comments via email or when you see us in the grocery store, whatever your preference is, let us know what's on your mind. Please note, typically the City Commission doesn't respond directly to questions during public comment. However, we're taking notes, and when the topic comes up, we'll address your questions. If you have questions or concerns that are not related to anything on the agenda tonight, we kindly ask that you leave your information with the outstanding, amazing, wonderful, youthful Judy Davids, our community engagement specialist, and she can get your contact information, and a lot of times we can get you an answer in short order. Staff is also taking notes, and they follow up as appropriate. So with that, who's first tonight? Not all at once. Yes, ma'am.
My name is Kimberly Martin. I'm a 20-year resident at 817 Mount Vernon Boulevard. I'm here to encourage each of you to approve the residents' petition to pave the third block of my road. Growing up, my husband and I both lived one block apart on North Wilson from age 6 through 21. I recall the side street, University, was a dirt road most of our childhood. It was oiled every summer, and if you weren't careful, you might burn your feet if you ran across the freshly oiled road from the hot summer sunshine. After we were married, we purchased my husband's grandparents' house on Forest. To this day, 44 years later, the side street Fairgrove remains unpaved for at least one block. This is the 4th time I have circulated petitions to pave Mount Vernon. I'm sure many of you are not familiar with the long history our road has had being an unapproved road. Excuse me. Among other things, I'm going to have to read fast. Among other things, it involves the installation of chip seal and seal coat, which did not last more than a few years, constant maintenance by way of grading, which, by the way, continues to degrade the slope of our road and thus the drainage, and laying additional gravel on a regular and ongoing basis. We, the residents, pay out of our own pockets for periodic dust abatement treatments, usually 3 times a year. Not to mention the increased necessity of car washes and exterior home and window washing, which results from the dust and dirt roadway. Did you know the residents at Mount Vernon receive special consideration from the city and police to allow residents to drive on the wrong side of the boulevard in order to reach homes in an attempt to minimize unnecessary road usage? Did you know the third block, the dead end, which is where I live, does not have a turnaround in the middle of the block? This too increases the traffic volume overall on the road and thus the maintenance by the city and owners. Did you know there is no crosswalk at the end of the block nearest the park and senior center? Pedestrians must cross the road from one driveway to the other, and this often means walking across the muddy road in order to reach the park and nature areas. And lastly, did you know there's not sufficient space for the vehicles to turn around at the dead end of the road when there are cars parked on the street? Oh, and I feel it is worth noting that the petition being considered tonight includes more than 50% of the owners per household, not just 50% of the frontage, which is another way to measure the residents' approval. Please, I strongly urge each of you to move this request forward to authorize the improvement of the third block of Mount Vernon Boulevard. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ms. Martin. Yes, sir, in the back.
Good evening, and my name's Anthony Krolikowski. I live at 618 Mount Vernon, and I've been here to address item number 7. I'll try to be as quick as possible. I prepared a little thing right now. What I have in front of me, I have a petition challenging your city engineer. Okay, and behind that, I have a list. I call it a decision matrix for the commissioner that lists all the activities result in this thing. Okay, hopefully I'll get this done. Say, I am prepared to submit a formal complaint and request for an investigation to the Bureau of Professional Licensing Review and the Lansing of Ms. Holly Donahue. She's responsible for my petitions requests, and she continued to ignore me and not respond to any of my requests. Ms. Holly is personally responsible in managing all the requests to review the boulevard as a complete road in a timely fashion. Okay, she's been making me feel inadequate, overwhelmed with intimidation tactics. She is truly unprofessional, in my opinion. Okay. I am also submitting a decision matrix to help the commission with a timeline of activities with this, delaying the decision to pave the third block until the investigation is finished, and that will probably be in 26. It will delay the decision for another 2 years, which will be time for commission not to make a rash decision in regards to paving the third block. And all I have right now is just, I have the, would I give it to the,
Yeah, if you hand it to our clerk,
okay?
Ms. Braswell, she'll enter it in for us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Yes, ma'am, in the orange.
Good evening. My name is Alice Brown. I live at 605 Mount Vernon on the southwest corner of Custer and Mount Vernon. I was here a couple weeks ago. Strong opposition to this resolution to pave the third block only of Mount Vernon. I spoke for nearly 3 minutes last time. I won't go through it all again. I do want to say that we have the most frontage that my husband and I do not drive on because our driveway empties onto Custer. The estimate we received for our portion was $30,000. My husband retired a couple years ago. I am semi-retired. We wanted to age in place. This is a huge, exorbitant amount of money for us to put forth as upstanding tax-paying citizens of this city. I've loved living here since 1989. I want to address the trees. I believe when I went home and there was the later discussion, I believe it was said that maybe there were 9 trees that would be taken down on that block. I walked the third block this evening before I came to the meeting. I took pictures. I did not run copies. But on my side alone, the south side, there were easily more than 9 trees that would be taken down. As far as the park and parking is concerned, I believe one of the commissioners mentioned people parking at the end of the street. In the 27 years I have lived there, I can count on one hand how many cars I've seen parked at the end of the street. I've actually spoken to people since then because I walk the neighborhood a lot with my dogs. I've spoken with them in the park and asked them, do you walk here? Where do you park? If you drive? Most people I spoke with said they park at the senior center. A lot of other people walk there with their families. Parking at the end to me is not advisable. There's a driveway that empties out on the north side of the street, the last house. I don't know the address. I myself would not park there. I see cars in the senior lot all the time. As I said, I walk through there. There was a commissioner who said they walk through there. I see and speak with people and their dogs all the time. They love it the way it is. I am not a tree hugger per se, but this is destruction of a beautiful area that I think should be preserved. I know that there are neighbors I've spoken with since the last meeting who said they don't really care either way. They just said yes. I want to be sure they understand that this is only the third block, because when this came up before, it was not clear at that time, and that's why a lot of people rescinded. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Brown. Yes, ma'am.
My name is Deborah Barnett. I am on 716 Mount Vernon Boulevard as well. On September 23rd, I spoke with several other homeowners who were a part of the majority of the vote, 56%, that declined the petition. For the last 1/3 of Mount Boulevard. I'm not sure why the board decided to a resolution 2. I'm not sure the process of it, but after hearing the majority of us speak to you the first time, I was kind of annoyed for the fact that I received a second letter that said, hey, you don't need to come, you don't need to speak, because we're just going on to the second one. And again, I'm here again because obviously I kind of have some misleading or mistrust for the fact that we spoke several times. We said we don't want it. We voted, we don't want it. And I said that I'm that tree hugging person she's talking about my ginkgo tree. And I am going to put a fuss about it. Mount Vernon is, I do understand that there are some who are opposed to it, but the majority of us are opposed to paving it. There are some people that want it paved. I heard from the audience that somebody said that it's a hard time moving around. My husband has a Ram 1500, and we are on that side that has to go around, and he has no problem doing it. There's enough space to make that turn with no problem. Our street is a walkable one, but if you pave that street, it's not going to be as much because people don't want to come down there because it's a dirt road. We don't get a lot of traffic. Why? Because you aren't going to go very fast on our road. Our primary concern is just the fact that it will no longer look the natural characteristics of our street. We like it. The dirt road has been a part of the community, the charm and the scenic beauty and tranquility of why we moved to this street. And so by paving it, you are gonna then have some of us either move. I was one of those people that said, hey, if you're gonna do it, tell me now, I'm leaving. Just for the fact that it is going to change the whole entire thing. And why would we only pave 1/3 of the street? So I am totally opposed to it. And again, if you go to Resolution 3, you will see me again. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Barnett. All right, who's next? Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Karen Anderson. I currently reside at 4315 West 14 Mile Road. I am here to talk about 3416 West 13 Mile Road. It is an apartment building that I lived in for about 9 months. Probably within the first month, I started having symptoms from the mold, and that building is mold filled. I actually have sent you all just only 2 pictures. I know for a fact that on the second floor ceilings have collapsed. There's an affidavit speaking to one, and the other one is one of the pictures that I sent you in an apartment number 10, I believe it is. The one that I took a picture of the mold coming through the walls is on the second floor. That's wasn't my apartment either, but I'm here today because how they cleaned it up was with Clorox and then painting over it. And then a young mom with a 2 or 3-year-old boy moved into that apartment. It broke my heart. I struggled for a little while to decide if I should tell her. And I have children myself, so I did. And unfortunately, she had just moved there from another bad apartment. The ceiling, or the roof, I should say, is actually caving in the middle. There's evidence of that from how the water runs off of the building. Because I was actually in the center of the building, I took some video of that too. So I am urging you guys to take a look at it. I had reported things to the city building department here. They told me that it didn't matter. They didn't care about anything except for the possible exterior, that I would have to hire a structural engineer to have it checked out, which obviously I cannot afford to do. MTH management is well aware of the problem. I actually had negotiated about a rent, and actually when I saw that my apartment number 4 was re-rented, it was actually being rented for less than what I originally negotiated my rent for. There's now 2 20-something-year-olds living there, but it is an unsafe building. Somebody is going to get hurt at some point, and I don't ever want to have to be contacted and have to attest that I reported this matter on several occasions to every agency or person that I possibly could. So I urge you guys to seriously look into this building. Thank you.
We'll do gentleman in the back, Mr. Razor.
Thank you, Mayor and Commission. Hi, everybody. Jim Razor, 502 West Lincoln. Agenda item 8 is about Lincoln, and I think that you've read about it. We just had a ton of crashes of cars in the parking lane getting nailed a lot late at night. Super loud, super disruptive, and it's dangerous. So we went to traffic committee, and I like the recommendation, but the recommendation was let's hire a consultant, let's study it, and let's do something next year. This is a problem when you look at the number of accidents that happen on this strip that we got to do something now, in my opinion. We could do a lot of things that are not very expensive. The parking lane is not very well delimited. It's just a stripe. A lot of people think it's a bicycle lane. We could make it look like a parking lane. We could do some reflective paint on it. We could do some concrete barriers, some sign that say road narrows, and of course we need a consultant to look at it. The speed is very, very high. I would resist anything that said, well, we should raise the speed limit, because I don't think that's the solution. This is a residential strip, but people travel down it real quickly. The police travel down it real quickly. Fire department does, A&M towing does. I know that they have emergencies to deal with, but there's a lot of kids in this neighborhood now, and we really need a long-term solution, but right now we need something that's short-term. So I would very much be up for, talking with somebody or being on a committee or working with the engineer. And I know that my neighbor Alex would be, and I know the rest of our neighbors would be, but given the magnitude of the issue and the number of crashes, that you see don't go back as far as my memory, because I've lived in that house on the corner for 20 years. And about twice a year, a car's going to get nailed on Lincoln at a high rate of speed. And a couple of occasions, there's been cars thrown 10 or 15 feet into lawns. And it's loud and it's dangerous, and we got to do something about it right away. So thanks, everybody, for your service. Ms. Davids, thank you for being here. You're so lovely. And we really appreciate everything you do. So, and there's no dissension in our neighborhood about, anything. We all know it's a problem. We got to do something about it. And we're looking to you and trusting you to do something quickly to make sure that this doesn't happen every, couple of months. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Reiser. Yes, sir, the best.
Good evening. My name is Alexander Nita. I reside at 506 West Lincoln Avenue. I'm neighbors with Jim. Initially, I was the one who brought the request to look at the speeding issue on Lincoln. My wife and I have had 2 vehicles totaled by drunk drivers. The initial request that I was sitting on my porch and cars were speeding down Lincoln during the middle of the day. Although we know drunk driving is an issue, it can't be stopped. But speeding can be, changed. So in addition to that, something definitely needs to happen, whether it's reflective pylons, glass bead that's thrown into paint that, cross hatches, something that signifies that it's actually a parking zone. And, we even discussed possibly with the road commission a speed monitoring device. So we have 2 children. Our neighbors have children. We play in the front yard frequently. The last thing that we want to have happen is someone is driving recklessly and someone gets hurt. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nita. Okay. Anybody else tonight? Going once? Going twice? Yes.
Nancy Poporowski for the People and the Planet. Are we all on the edge of our seats due to the election? With one group promoting reopening dangerous nuclear plants and another group deregulating pollution control, it's evident our environment is in trouble. Finding a job, affordable housing, or safe schools for our precious children have no meaning if we're dying from polluted air and water. Too often our politics, meaning both groups, take it for granted that we can build, 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 drill, 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 and waste, 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 without negative consequences for the planet. Our planet is overpopulated, and our natural resources do not go on forever. Just like us, they will have an expiration date, unless you're Mick Jagger, and that's another story. So, as we're celebrating Indigenous Peoples Day, remember this profound Cree proverb. Only when the last tree has died, and the last river has been poisoned, and the last fish has been caught, will we realize we cannot eat money. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Proposki. All right, anybody else tonight want to speak at public comment? Once, going twice. All right, we're going to close public comment and bring the meeting back up to this side of the table. So that brings us to the consent agenda. Does anyone wish to pull anything off the consent agenda for further discussion? Commissioner Colo.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Item K.
Item K, approval of fleet equipment purchases. Okay. Anybody else? Okay, so we have a consent agenda that consists of everything with the exception of item K. Someone want to make a motion to that effect? A motion by Commissioner Douglas. Is there a second? Second by Commissioner Herzog. Discussion on the consent agenda. With that, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, motion passes. Item K, Commissioner Colo.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this item pertains to purchasing some new vehicles this year. We've had a long conversation at this table about transferring our fleet to a more modernized, carbon-friendly fleet. And I know that Mr. Filipski has been working hard. We have a CIP program and trying to incorporate these changes. One item that we need, and the next step we need, was a discussion with this body about EV and solar within the community. We had a meeting scheduled back for June of this year, and it became in conflict with other meetings that we had. So I just, while I fully endorse approving this tonight and let's get these vehicles purchased, I just want to bring to staff's attention that we'd like to get this meeting back on the schedule that we had once again scheduled for the summer. I would think that maybe January of next year would be a good time to ask the staff to bring that back to the table.
Is that a motion?
Yeah, it's a motion, sure. So I move approval of this, of the fleet purchases, and then add a resolution to have the EV and solar workshop in January.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Cole. Is there a second? Second by Commissioner Macy. Discussion? All right, with that, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? All right, motion passes. All right. That brings us to item 7, which is Standard Resolution 2, Special Assessment Paving of Mount Vernon Boulevard. City Engineer Donahue.
Good evening, Mayor and City Commissioners. Tonight, this is the second step to create a special assessment district for paving of Mount Vernon from Custer to the dead end. The packet has the city assessor's report, and that includes the individual cost estimates per property for this particular block of Mount Vernon. Standard Resolution 2 is also included here for your consideration tonight. This resolution simply sets a date for the public hearing of necessity. So that date would be scheduled for November 11th. And if approved, the city clerk would then put a notice in the paper and also send notice to everybody in the district so that they know the public hearing is coming up, and then that gives them the opportunity to speak on this issue and say if they think this is a necessity or not a necessity. So it's a fairly simple resolution tonight.
Okay, questions? Ms. Donahue. Commissioner Cheatham.
Sorry, so tonight we are just setting the date. That's all that we're doing tonight? Okay,
yes.
Thank you.
Commissioner Douglas.
Move approval.
A motion by Commissioner Douglas, or a second? Second by Commissioner Colo. Discussion. I'll just add, I have a couple questions just to confirm, because I heard some things at public comment that I want to make sure I understand, Ms. Donahue. So first, just to reiterate, this is only 1/3, or the third block of Mount Vernon, correct?
Correct.
Okay. The second thing I heard was, I heard two competing stories about petitions and the percentage. Can you confirm the latest official petitions, both in terms of number of residents percentage as well as by linear frontage?
Got me on the
Sorry.
spot here.
When people throw numbers at me, I just want to make sure I understand them.
Okay, so the percentage that voted or signed in favor of paving is 46.2%. That is 748.5 linear feet of frontage out of 1,619.2 feet of frontage.
Okay, so it's 46% of frontage.
Correct.
Okay, and it was about 50-50 if I remember correctly.
11 out of 22
11
households, yeah.
Okay, all right. All right. Any other discussion points, Commissioner Colo?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I just want to recognize that there are people out here tonight, and that this is a passionate topic, and I think it's a topic that deserves a conversation, and that's the conversation that happens when we invite everyone that's impacted by this and notify everyone that's impacted about it to come out to the meeting for the public hearing in which we can discuss and debate the merits of it. That seems to be the appropriate time to make the next go, no-go decision. I also want to say we have an incredibly talented and professional engineer who was denigrated at public comment today. She is amazing and does great things for the city. So I in no way doubt her professionalism. So I think it's important, and I'm sure everyone at this table agrees with that also.
Yeah. I'll just say, well, I appreciate that comment, Commissioner Colo, from the get-go, and I understand there are some people that want to see this street paved. I'm stuck on the 46%. I'm stuck on using city resources to advance it forward for the fact that I struggle to support this for a number of reasons I stated before, primarily because it's only a third. Like, what's the plan for the entire street? Why are we going after just a third? I would like to see a comprehensive vote on the entire strip. And then even if that occurs, you got to have a strong majority. And you know, this is a unique street. It has a number of trees that have grown over the years that are very mature. It's very different than a lot of our other unpaved streets that we've easily approved because, you know, they're pretty generic. They're a last block between two major roadways or something. This is a little bit different of a street. And while I know not every neighbor agrees on the street, until I see something much stronger than 46%, and I see something that is entirely for the block and that we have a way to minimize the impact to trees, I'm going to have a hard time supporting step after step because I don't think it's a priority if it's not overwhelming demand for it. And I think that's up to the neighbors to decide. Commissioner Cheatham?
Yeah, when this came before us a few weeks ago, I was really on the fence about this. I really was kind of struggling. This is one of the decisions up here that I was really struggling with. And I did vote in favor of moving it forward. I have to say, since then, I have taken my dog for a walk on the street and really looked a little bit more closely. I didn't really thought about the situation. And I do want to acknowledge that I've really had to change of heart on that I'm really, at this point, not in favor of moving forward for the reasons that it being a third, the last third doesn't make sense to me. I agree that having the whole thing, looking at the whole, those three blocks together makes more sense because I think from what I understand, the maintenance is very different on the last, on the paved versus unpaved. And so there's a disjointedness there that might be complicated for our staff to I mean, they can manage it, but why give them that added challenge? I also, we heard a lot that the unpaved roads give it this nice country feel. I don't actually think that unpaved roads are what gives it this nice feel. I think it's the trees. I think it's a very nice tree-lined area, and so and it is quite a cost to the homeowners. And so I think weighing those things together, I would want to see a strong benefit to the broader community if we're going to ask people to pay that much money, and I'm just not seeing it. It is a dead-end road. It's not connecting. There would be the taking down a tree. So I understand that some of the residents are in favor of it, but I would want to see a much larger majority. I think I'm in agreement with you, wanting to see a much larger majority, and I'd like to see a more cohesive, the three blocks, looking at that together to have a more comprehensive plan. So I think last time I didn't even say anything because I was so on the fence that I didn't even know how I was going to vote until it came out of my mouth. So I just want to speak tonight on that. Thank you.
We'll go with Commissioner Hunt and Commissioner Douglas.
I would say I have to agree with what you stated, Mr. Mayor and Commissioner Cheatham. I understand it's 46%, and that's the difference is really one household away from 50% or 51% that would be needed to push this over. But I'm more concerned about the cost to the homeowners, considering so many homeowners do not want this, and there's one particular home that would have to pay close to $30,000. Understanding that this is going to be spread over 15 years, that's still a cost per year to those homeowners that do not want this. And my concern also, the trees. While it may be 9 trees, while it may be more than that, it does take away the aesthetic and the feel of that neighborhood. And there's a detrimental effect to the environment with those reduction in those trees. So, like Commissioner Cheatham, I walk the neighborhood, and there's a difference that I feel when walking that street versus Lexington, which is one street over, kind of the same dynamic, but the speed of the vehicles that come through Lexington and the number of the vehicles that come through Lexington that don't come through Mount Vernon, you can tell that there's an impact on the walkability of that particular street. So I'm going to be consistent in my last vote and probably vote against this motion.
Commissioner Douglas and then Commissioner Macy.
Yes, so as one of our speakers pointed out, this is the 4th time this has come before the City Commission. And for those of us who will continue to serve on the commission in coming years, if we do not approve it now, it will be back in front of us again in a couple of years, which means our staff has to go through the whole process of the estimating process and the public communication process. And I just, so there is consistently on this street, it's always going to be like about 50-50. And yet the case was made for the additional cost that the city incurs in maintaining a street like this, for the dirt, the air pollution that results from this. I agree that it's a dicey situation, but I just feel like it's time for us to move forward with this. And if we don't now, and it comes back in 3 years at $51.49, it's going to be a lot more expensive then than it is now. Those costs are not going to go down. I just feel like this is, and I do wish we had petitions for the whole street, but we don't. This is what we have before us, and this is what we have to consider. So all we're doing today is moving forward with the public hearing. I mean, we had people come and speak today, but perhaps not, perhaps realizing that there was still another chance for everyone to be heard, and I would like everyone to be heard.
Commissioner Macy.
So I don't disagree with the analysis of the mayor and Commissioners Cheatham and Hunt about the seeming issues with this, and the final vote on this, I think, will be pretty close. I guess I'll be surprised if it does go forward, because I think we have said that 50%, more than 50% is the standard. But I think what we looked at last time was that this is 50% of the households, and so we were at least willing to give them a voice. And I just don't think we've done that at this point, because the public hearing, I mean, we heard tonight, they were told, don't come tonight, this isn't the time you're supposed to come. And it's fine that they come anyway and tell us. And I think she wants to get her point across. She's going to tell us every time she has a chance. But those other people who are reading that and like, oh, this isn't the time for me to come, were turning down their petition before they've even had a chance to speak. And so that, to me, feels like too early to do that. And so after the next one, it seems like a lot of us are feeling like maybe this isn't the right thing for this street to only do this third, and when most of the frontage does not want it. By the way, I don't agree with the mayor and Commissioner Cheatham that it has to be a strong majority or whatever words they were. 50% has been pretty much our standard, and that's what I would go with again. But we're not there with the frontage, at least. So I'm a little bit skeptical from what I've heard at this table that this is going to pass at the next time, but I do think that I want to give those people who put this petition together a chance to have their say.
Yeah, I'll just say, for me, you're right. Historically, we've looked at the 50% threshold. I think in this particular case, giving everything else, the impact to trees, the impact to the fact that it's only a third, the impact that you're asking people to pay because the lots are bigger, tens of thousands of dollars. I think that putting that impact with just a bare majority is concerning to me, like Commissioner Hunt said, and so that's why I give a higher threshold for this particular one. So you're right. In the past, we have looked at it 52, 55%. But I think the impact, the outcome of more than just a paved street, it's dramatically going to change the look and feel and dynamic, and the bill to the lot owners, because they are larger lots, is going to be significant even with our match. And that's another $500,000 on our match, I think 486 that we could put towards other projects that people have 50, 60, 70% desire to do. So that's why I'm treating this one a little bit differently. And I get it, people should be heard at the hearing, but if I know that I'm not going to be supporting this, given the fact that it's only 46%, given the fact it's only a third, given the fact that it's tens of thousands of dollars to homeowners, I just don't want to waste anyone's time on my vote, anyhow. You know, if it comes back again next year and it's 60%, okay. Now it seems that, you know, we're over a certain threshold worth debate to me. But right now at 46%, I don't see we're there. Even at 50-50, I don't see that we're there, for me. That's why there's 7 of us up here to vote. All right, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? No. 3 noes? Okay, 3 noes. Motion passes, so you'll schedule a hearing? Okay. All right. That brings us to item 8. Ms. Donahue, the September 2024 Traffic Committee resolutions.
Yes, tonight I have recommendations from our meeting, and we have 7 different resolutions to go over. And I have a couple images up here on the screen just to help with some of the discussion points. So our first recommendation was a request to install 2 speed humps on Forest Avenue. This is between Main and Rosedale. This road had an 85th percentile speed of 28 miles per hour and 674 vehicles per day. The petitioner provided a signed petition with 71% of the residents in favor and 100% of the properties adjacent to these 2 humps in favor. And so the Traffic Committee is recommending approval of this item. If approved, we would plan to include this in one of our 2025 projects.
Questions from Ms. Donahue? Is that, you said 100%. I read that, and I just want to confirm. I don't think we've ever had with the people adjacent to these traffic measures that the property owners that are next to them that will be near
That's
them.
a requirement for speed humps. We need, I think it was 65% of the block in general needs to be in
Right,
favor.
we had 70.
And if it's right in front of your house, you must sign in favor, or else we're not going to put it there. So the addresses that are boxed here represent those properties that were part of that 100%. So
Gotcha.
it's, you know, 5 properties on this street here. Okay, moving on. Our next item, which was talked about a little bit in public comment, was a safety concern.
Real quick, Ms. Donahue, any questions on this one? Okay.
Next was the safety concern on West Lincoln Avenue. This is between Woodward and Lafayette. We've noted that there's been 7 parked vehicles hit by drivers over the past 3 years. So that's just looking at our standard of a 3-year accident history. We also found that the 85th percentile speed on this street was 31 miles per hour, and it's a 25 mile per hour road. Looking at this, we presented 4 different options to the Traffic Committee and then also requested some feedback from the neighborhood here. And we did have 5 residents come and speak on this issue. The options that we looked at, and I only have the one that was selected shown here, but we looked at getting rid of all the on-street parking altogether, which is not ideal for these residents who use it quite frequently. We also looked at installing reflective bollard delineators along parts of the parking lane just to help draw some attention to that, and ultimately that's kind of what we went with, and I'll get into more detail on that. We also looked at just getting rid of parking completely on one side of the road and shifting traffic to that side of the road, and then that gives you basically a buffer zone between the 2 lanes of traffic, a buffer zone, and then the parked cars. So hopefully parked cars would be getting hit less in that instance. And then we also looked at the option of installing a dynamic feedback sign to tell people how fast they're driving along Lincoln. So based on the resident feedback and discussion with the Traffic Committee, they're recommending that we proceed with the option that's shown here up on the screen. So this is installing reflective delineators. So they're like those little bollards. You see a lot of them are in Ferndale. We don't have a ton of them here in Royal Oak, and if you hit them, they pop back up. Basically to act as bump outs. So rather than paving with curbs and having to put sewers and drainage in, just using these that are bolted down to the road to draw the eye to the situation here. DPS did have some concerns about installing these just because plowing Lincoln becomes a little bit more problematic. They get in the way of the plows and they have to kind of weave around them to get into the parking lane there. So the committee, when looking at this, wanted to modify this exhibit by basically just eliminating, and let me zoom in here for you. So for example, if you had this kind of trapezoid-shaped bump out area, these yellow dots are the delineators. Getting rid of the areas that are circled in red. Our thought was maybe a plow could fit through there and plow kind of on both sides of these delineators. So that was their formal resolution. I talked with DPS after the meeting and they kind of laughed at me and said, no, our plows are 10 feet wide. We can never fit in that parking lane with those there. But they did suggest it might be best to have the upstream diagonal bollards installed so that, like, for example, if you're driving eastbound here, these 3 bollards are seen by the driver. Don't necessarily need these ones along the parking lane, and you definitely don't need these ones that you're driving past. So DPS would prefer that we just stick with like the 3 on the upstream end. That gives them a little bit more room to maneuver. It also gives a little bit more room for cars to park a little bit further back, so we might save a few more parking spaces that way. So I think that's a good idea. If you wanted to move that way, we might have to tweak that resolution from the way it's written right now. So I hope that made sense, and I'll clarify if there's any questions. Mayor, would you prefer to stop after each item
we'll
and kind of go over it?
just while we're top of mind. Any questions on this one? I have a couple. Well, we'll go with Commissioner Colo first.
Okay, so I'll just ask a quick question about this parking trapezoid, or this trapezoid that's being created. Would you be able to park if you pulled up? Could you pull back in to that trapezoid spot?
Yes. I think what I would do is put maybe 5 to 10 feet of striping, again, just to kind of point out the parking lane to drivers. So there would be a little bit of a zone where you couldn't, but I don't think we need to stripe the full. It's 20 feet at the short end, and I think it's closer to 38, 40 feet on the long end. So you can definitely get one more parking spot if we don't stripe that whole thing.
Okay, so a car could back in a really nice
go past
protected
it and
spot.
come back in, yes.
Okay. Okay.
Commissioner
My
Herzog?
first question.
How many crashes did you say again?
It was 7 crashes in a 3-year period. Most of them were at night, and I believe most of them were heading westbound, but I think it was like 4 westbound, 3 eastbound, so actually a pretty decent split.
And were they mostly drunk driving accidents, or?
4 of them were OWIs, and then 3 of them were, like, they found it the next morning, so not sure, can't say for sure if those were or not.
So I have a question as well. I mean, I like the idea of the bollards. I think that, allows at least some visibility, like, hey, slow down. I don't think we're going to get people to, necessarily abide by, the flashing, you're going this, if they're already deciding to drive unsafe, it's probably not a big change factor. But if you can condition their natural human driving response by, with the bollards, the question I had is there a ability, or would it have any impact if you kind of narrow those lanes a little bit with an extra stripe of, you know what I mean, of line going down both east and west, and it kind of, shrinks the lane a little bit so the eyes, I know I get all the time going north on Main, we've talked about this countless times, but because there's so many lanes and it's so wide, I got to check myself every single time so I'm not speeding. But if we narrow the lanes with an extra strip, would that have an impact, you think?
That was something we were hoping we could do. Unfortunately, the lanes existing out there are 10 feet wide, so that's the minimum on a major road.
Okay.
We really can't go narrower than that. And we can't go into the parking lane anymore either, because I think those are 7.5 feet, so I can't give less than that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, it does. Commissioner Douglas?
Well, I was going to go there. So if you change the striping to make it look like the lanes are less than 10 feet wide, even though they still are 10 feet wide, could you get away with that?
I'm not sure what you mean. Like, how would I make it look like less?
Smoke and mirrors.
I don't know, like because you got a double center line right there right now, so maybe make the double center line a little bit wider than usual, which then visually narrows the 2 driving lanes.
Or if you were to put like parking spots in, like stripe the spots. I don't know if the neighbors would like that. That's another question, but that's another optical gesture. You know what I mean? To signify that, you know, hey,
It's something you could do to, again, draw the eyes and show this is a parking lane, it's not a bike lane, and it's definitely not a drive lane. Our concern was, you know, that's more maintenance required for DPS every year to have to go restripe all those stalls. Not that that's the end of the world, but we try not to overdo it if there's not really a strong need for it. The striping out there is reflective. That's what we install on all of our roads. So I think the parking lane is pretty, you can see it at night. So I guess I wouldn't be strongly opposed to it, but I don't know that it's going to make a huge difference either. And one thing that when you set out those stalls, you kind of tell people, like, you must park this way now. Whereas if there's no striping, you can kind of, sometimes you can squeeze an extra car in there, you know, if you're not making them all the same size stall.
we'll go with Commissioner Colo and then Commissioner Herzog. Oh, wait, let's go to Commissioner Cheatham. She hasn't spoken yet.
So just to piggyback on what I was just speaking of, could we put a second parking stripe on the inside of the existing parking stripe so we're not narrowing the 10-foot buffer that we have, or adding a parking stripe inside that parking lane would, I don't know if that would achieve the objective of making it look more narrow.
They might just park on it, but
My only concern is, like, what does that mean? If I'm a driver, I have not been trained. Like, what does a double yellow stripe, or sorry, double white stripe mean? They're 6-inch stripes, so you'd space it. You'd have a 6-inch stripe, a 6-inch space, a 6-inch stripe. So I've now lost a foot of the parking lane. If I'm a driver, I'm confused. I don't know what that means. And do I have to be on inside of both of those white lines, or just the outside one?
That's fair.
I think it makes it more confusing.
So then my second question too, can you talk a little bit about the digital sign display? And I see it's about $12,000, which in the grand scheme of the road fund's not that much money. Is there a benefit it might be able to add by adding these in addition to whatever we decide to do?
Sure. So we've had requests for these in the past. Often they're on like residential streets, and we usually say, like, we're not doing those on a residential road. Studies are very mixed on these. You know, of course, the people that sell them say that they work perfectly, and there's not a whole lot of studies out there. Believe me, we've looked. Some say it'll bring down the speed 1 mile an hour. Some say 5 miles an hour. Some say it works for the first month and then doesn't work after that. They seem to have better success in school zones, but straight segments like this, not a lot of data out there. So our thought was, maybe we could try it here. This might be a good place to try it. It's a street where we know we have speeding. It's a major road. It has a good amount of traffic on it. And it would give us an answer for future investigations. Do these actually do anything or not really? So I think the committee was a little bit opposed to it because they were worried if we did the bollards and the signs that might skew the results. So is it the sign that's doing the job here, or is it the bollards that are doing the job here? So they ultimately said, let's not do the signs, but I don't think they had strong opposition to it either, if that helps.
It sounds like an easy thing to add. Thank you.
I think my comment is around, we've been talking about how it visually looks, the lines, but the folks that are driving are maybe visually impaired from drinking. And so does it really matter if we shrink or, you know, the lines, because they're not seeing the cars that are parked on the side of the street either. So then that makes me think, in addition to something like this, is there a social policy that we need to do to make it seem like a less intriguing to drive while drinking? Is there something that we do, if these are happening at a certain time? Has there been anything that we can do besides just putting up structures? I don't know if I'm, about drunk driving, like making it easy. I'm looking at, sorry, Chief Moore, but I don't know. I haven't studied it, so I don't know the answer to it. I'm just wondering if there's more mobility options, or if we don't ticket at night after a certain time, like, so that people leave their cars instead of getting in the cars. I don't know.
I'm trying to understand your question and try to help you out a little bit. We participate in the Drive Sober, Get Pulled Over program, the grant programs every year. This year, the police department won an award for the large number of OWI arrests. So the targeted enforcement's out there. Maybe doing better on messaging may help. I don't know if that's the way you're leaning.
Commissioner Cheatham?
Well, just a quick response to the idea of putting more striping on the parking side. So I live here, my house is on the screen up there, and I would say we try very hard to not park on the street for this reason, but when I do, there's very little wiggle room. Like I pull my mirror in, so I don't think there'd be any space. So whether it be confusing for drivers, probably, but I think it's also going to be really confusing for people parking their car because there's no way they'll be able to park within the lines. I did wonder, why did I write this down? Sorry, I wrote myself a note and now I don't remember what it meant. But it sounds like this, when we've talked a little bit about this, Ms. Donahue, but it sounds like this is really geared towards showing where the parked cars are. It would probably have little impact on the traffic speed. Is that fair?
It may have some impact. It's the whole idea of traffic calming, right? There's something unusual and I don't totally know what's going on, so you tend to just take your foot off the accelerator. So I think it could help a little. Is it going to change 31 miles to 25 miles an hour? I very much doubt that.
And I appreciate the traffic committee's point of if you do both of these interventions, how do you know what's actually working? That's good scientific method. But I wonder, could we roll out this part and do traffic studies after some time, I don't know, what 4 months, whatever, and then potentially put the speed notification sign up after that, and then see if there's any effect there. So it's you have a little bit more data about what intervention does, and I think that this is probably the most pressing one. I think there's actually been an accident since that 7th. I think that there was one more recently. So I think we're at 8 in the last 3 years. So this seems the most pressing, but I wonder if that might be the plan, that we could phase things in a little bit, and then that could give you some data points to maybe use for other future projects too.
Sure. Yeah, that's absolutely something we could do.
And I wrote only lane, but I don't remember what that means, so I'm sorry.
Commissioner Macy?
Yep, that reminds me, we had a public comment saying that, we need to do something fast on this. It looks to me like you have this scheduled for this year. Is that right?
Yes. DPS had said if we can get to it, we'll do it this fall, but they also know the leaf season is coming up, so they didn't want to overpromise, but they said if we can't get it this fall, we'll do it first thing in the spring. So I'm not going to a consultant, or I'm not sure what that comment was, but there's no extra effort planned after this. It's just if it's approved, we'll program it and get it built.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Hunt?
I just have a question to follow up on Commissioner Colo's question about the digital speed signs. Where would those, if implemented, where would those be placed on each side of the road? Would they be furthest away from Woodward as you're speeding toward Woodward, or?
No, good question. So we wanted to keep them kind of in the middle somewhere if we could, but we also wanted to make sure like a parked car wouldn't block your view of that. So I think for westbound, and this is off the top of my head, but I think we were looking at West Street kind of in this area for the westbound traffic. And then for eastbound, I think, I'm trying to remember where we said. If we do put these areas with the bollards in, I think we would try and put one kind of close to one of those, just because there won't be parked cars there blocking the view of the sign. So it's either that, because I think if we put it right here at the beginning by Woodward, like cars haven't gotten up to speed yet, so I don't think it helps there.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody else on this one? If you think of any questions, we can certainly have time to ask. We can move on to the next recommendation.
Okay. Our next item, this is related to accessible parking here in the downtown. So we had a recommendation from Rich and Associates who did a parking study previously, and also a goal of our aging in place plan to increase some on-street barrier-free parking in the downtown. So the DDA had reached out to staff and asked that we put together an option for installing 2 handicap spaces in front of the post office on West 2nd Street. So the option that's shown here, and just to orient you, Washington is here on the left, Center Street over here, here's our parking deck, and then this is 2nd Street with the post office on top. So the option that's shown here is what the staff is recommending. It does require that 2nd Street be converted to one through lane. Right now it's like 2 lanes and you can either go right on Washington or left on Washington. It's a one-way road. So this would require that we go to 1 through lane, but it does allow, by doing that, you get to have this nice 5-foot aisle next to the barrier-free spaces, but also next to the other on-street parking spaces too. So people that are parking for their post office can get out a little bit more comfortably and walk into the post office there. So this gives us an aisle next to the parallel spaces, also a loading and drop-off zone on the south side of the road. So that's where all those post office boxes are. And right now it kind of feels like you're stopping in a lane that maybe you shouldn't be. So now it would actually be a loading zone with signage to tell you that it's okay to stop there. That loading zone would end as you approach Washington, and then drivers can either choose to turn right or turn left. So the DDA has agreed to fund this if approved by the commission tonight, about $25,000 for this one. So if approved, we would plan to include this in one of our 2025 projects.
Questions on this one? Commissioner Colo?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I remember we got the Rich and Associates study, and they did talk about accessible parking in the downtown. But I don't remember a call out for 2 spots on 2nd Street. So I just, Ms. Howard, do you know how like the 2-spot idea came up? Because that seems like just in the portion of the city that's in, I love the idea of adding more accessible parking, but this is such a isolated part of our city that if you're using this accessible parking here, you're only going to the post office. You're not going to the parking deck next door, the office building that has its own parking deck right across the street, or the empty field. So this seems like paying 2 accessible parking, sure, we're adding accessible parking downtown, but only to the post office.
That's true. And I'll be honest, I don't know if they said we should definitely have 2 here. That was just the request that came to engineering from DDA.
I see the executive director of the DDA back there if he wants to chime in. Or a head of community development, which I don't know which one you're here as tonight.
Well, the reference back to it was included in the Rich study, the analysis that was done, and included an analysis of the MPS system and the downtown operation in totality. This specific site was one that the Rich study recommended that have 2 spots for it. Because of the width and the one-way movement of the street, it felt was in there. The DDA brought it back up because that wasn't included in one of the original recommendations. So the DDA did ask engineering to look at it, come up with designs and cost estimates. Howie was able to do that, and it went back to the DDA, and they selected an option and agreed to fund it. Handicap parking in the rest of the downtown really wasn't addressed in the Rich study as far as where and locations. I know that's been done in the past, but it's difficult to come up with the width in order to do that in this fashion, in this configuration.
Okay, so just so I'm clear then, the Rich study did say there should be 2 spots on 2nd Street in front of the post office. Oh, awesome. Thank you.
Commissioner Douglas?
Yeah, and just occurred to me, and I'm sure, you know, better minds than mine have analyzed the location of these 2 spots, but doesn't it seem like they should be located maybe a couple spots further east so that when people get out of their car, they're right near the ramp that goes up to the front door?
That is possible to do. The engineer that worked on this, I know that there is a grade issue over here. I think there's some like a timber wall or a stone retaining wall, something there. So getting the ramp grades to work and be ADA compliant would require that we start going onto the post office property, which is not necessarily easy to get permission to do, you know, in writing. So we kind of tried to shy away from that. And our other thought was, you know, people probably do want to use the ramp if they need to use the handicap parking spaces, but not necessarily. And this does provide a direct access to the doors if they are able to use the stairs, while not being extremely far away from the ramp itself.
Okay, again, you're the engineers, not me, just a thought.
Okay. Anybody else? All right.
Our next item here was a request to put some bollard delineators. This is on East University Avenue in front of the garage door columns for main north lofts. So the concern here is that takeout drivers and delivery trucks are parking in front of the access doors for the residential parking garage here. And so having issues entering and exiting their garage at times. We did do something similar on West 5th Street in front of the Skylofts building, which seems to be working well, and we haven't had any complaints from the residents or from DPS on that one. And so the committee is recommending that we move forward with these 3 collapsible bollards here for this item.
Questions on this one? Okay.
Okay. Our next item was a request to look at the existing informational signage that's on DeVillen Avenue. This is along Red Run Park. We have some brown signs out there that are shown here that say for park use, park and school lots on Girard. These signs are a little bit confusing. They kind of insinuate that on-street parking is not allowed if you're going to the park, that you shouldn't be parking there. However, this is not a permit parking zone. It's open for public parking. And so these signs really don't appear to be providing much additional information. We assume that most people who are going to these parks, especially when they're very busy, are repeat visitors, primarily going there for sports. The school district, we reached out to them just to see if they had any thoughts on this. They mentioned that their Churchill parking lots, both on Girard and there on DeVillen, are used pretty regularly by park goers, so they think people know that those are there. So they really didn't have a strong opinion one way or the other. So to help remove confusion, the committee is recommending that we take down these 4 brown signs that are along DeVillen Avenue.
Just a question.
Yeah.
There was a reason why they were put in there. Do we have the history on that?
Oh, we looked. I was not able to find a resolution or anything in our commission minutes. My guess is that the street was getting congested with a lot of people going to the park, but they probably didn't want to turn this into a permit parking zone, so this might have been like a happy, feel-good measure that really didn't have a lot of teeth to it. They've been there since, I don't have my notes in front of me, but I remember it was like a very long time, at least since the 90s, and I think before that even, just based on our sign inventory. So.
And they've almost had zero. I mean, I go to that park constantly. My son practices soccer there, and it is, and for years they had games there and everything. And yeah, you try to park in the parking lot. Sometimes it's full. Sometimes you're running late and you park right there. And I don't know that it's deterred any cars. I don't know that they've had any effect, so to speak.
I don't think it does, and we did send notices to everybody in case people felt very strongly about this, and we didn't have any feedback at the meeting or by email or anything like that, so.
Okay, all right. Good.
Okay. Our next item here is pretty simple. This is a request to do crosswalk striping and pedestrian signs for a mid-block crossing on Detroit at Elizabeth Avenue. So this is a crosswalk that's on the east side of Elizabeth Avenue that leads into Wagner Park. It's pretty consistent with our past practice if we're providing access to a park, especially at a mid-block crossing, to have striping and the signage installed there. And so the committee is recommending approval of this request.
Okay. Any questions? Okay.
Okay. And our last one is, I will not go into all the details here, so don't worry. But our last item here was really to look at all the traffic calming measures that we've done over the past several years, just to see how effective what we've agreed on here and actually installed, how effective they've been. So we divided our analysis into 3 different categories. We looked at speed humps, which are only on local streets. So that's our first column of data here. We looked at some traffic calming measures that we've done on local streets, and then traffic calming measures that we've done on major streets over the years. So I'm not going to go into all the details, but I did kind of want to give you some broad conclusions that might help us make some decisions in the future. So speed humps in general appear to be very effective. Granted, I only have 3 data points here, but we're seeing that the speeds are going down and also the traffic volumes are going down on these streets. So that does seem to be a really effective tool that we have when warranted. Traffic calming on local streets was not as effective, unfortunately. So because we have speed humps at our disposal, we really think we should only be looking at other calming measures like islands or bump outs on local streets if we've got some very excessive speeds, over 30 miles per hour, which we don't see a whole lot on local roads. So if we do have to move forward with something like this on a local street, what we saw with the one that did work was that the lane widths were like as narrow as possible. So 8.5 to 9 feet wide seems to be the ticket to slow people down when they're driving past some of these things that we install. And then finally, traffic calming improvements like bump outs and refuge islands on major roads are great. They should continue to be installed, but primarily really to help with pedestrian crossing improvements. We don't have great results here that are showing that these are really slowing down vehicles. Designing our roadways with deviating lane alignments such that drivers are not driving in a straight line down the road seems to be the best method here to get the results that we want. So that's what we saw on Normandy from Coolidge to Crooks. That's the one where we really had the most offset in your driving lane, and that was the one that had the best results. Again, it's one data point, so we still have some data to collect over the years here. Also, we may want to start looking at the speed limits on these roads. Perhaps 25 miles per hour just really isn't an appropriate speed limit on some of our major roads in the city here. So that's something we can continue to look at as these requests come in. As we reviewed the post-installation traffic data, we did notice that some of the speed limits on our major roads is something that we should look at. So Michigan law states that the speed limit needs to be set at the nearest multiple of 5 miles per hour within the 85th percentile speed. So that's kind of the first thing that you look at when setting a speed limit. But Michigan law also states that you shall not set the speed limit below the 50th percentile speed unless there's an engineering study to indicate that you should otherwise. So the 50th percentile speed just means half of the drivers are above that speed, half the drivers are below that speed. So we noted that the 50th percentile speed was 28 miles per hour both on Normandy from Coolidge to Crooks and also on Gardenia. We had 35 miles per hour and 32 miles per hour respectively on those streets. And so the committee is recommending that engineering do a detailed study of both of those corridors just to take a closer look at the speed limit, make sure the data we had is representative. So the resolution just for this item is just to study those corridors and bring those results back to the traffic committee at a future meeting.
Questions? Commissioner Kolo.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So Ms. Allen, with this traffic study, is this a study to solely determine what a new speed limit should be, or is it what traffic calming we could introduce to reduce that 50% speed also?
It'll be both. So it's what are drivers most comfortable doing out there?
Yeah.
And does it seem reasonable to change that speed limit? Or, I don't think we're going to 45 miles an hour on these roads.
Yeah.
But going from 25 to 30 might be reasonable. And what I really want to start doing, because we're doing so many major roads in these next 10 years, is a couple years ahead of time start looking at that data and coming up with, do we want to add more work to this and do some calming, or do we want to just look at the speed limit? Do we want to do both? So doing these couple streets here will help with that.
And then one example here is Trafford and the amazing increase in the commercial traffic on that road. There's an error in the data somewhere,
I think
right?
there's, yeah.
There's an anomaly.
Yeah, there are a couple data sets here, like also Merrill with the speed. I'm like, I don't necessarily think that this one is correct here either.
Mm-hmm.
But that percentage of commercial traffic doesn't, until you get to 10%, you really don't worry too much that it's too much commercial traffic on a street. So I kind of just kept it out and said, it's not telling us much. So.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions? Mr. Macy.
I'll move approval as presented of items 6A, 6C, 6D, 6E, 6F, and 6G.
Is that all of what the?
Yep.
All of them but B. Okay, then. Okay, we have a second by Commissioner Colum. All right. Let me just make sure I have these all understood. All right, there's a motion on the table. Any discussion? Okay, I'm looking at something before I decide if I'm going to discuss something. Sorry. Oh, Commissioner Cheatham.
I just want to comment on the handicap parking by the post office, the accessible parking. I'm really glad to see this here. I think this is part of the aging in place plan. I think it's part of walkability and accessibility in our city. So the post office provides really essential services, and while there is a parking deck across the street, a lot of people really can't, that's just too much for them to be able to do to get to use the services. I think about my parents, they would really struggle with that. So I just want to just state here that I'm really glad to see that here.
Yeah, I'll just echo that. I mean, I did think about that in the garage. Well, there's spots there, but also we're getting sort of that lane put in as well for, it always feels like you're doing something wrong, you know, when you're dropping off your mail real quick and you get rushed and you're like, oh crap, I dropped it on the ground, and you got to get out, and, you know. So I think it will, and there's usually a lot of activity around there, especially during frequent shipping times and the holidays and stuff. And I think that narrowing of those lanes, having those spots available to people, there's a lot of wins there, and I don't think it's going to impact traffic. It's not going to impact, you know, parking otherwise that able-bodied people can get to. So I think it's a good deal. And it's paint. All right, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, motion passes. All right, that leaves us with B. Commissioner Cheatham.
I guess I just want to say, it's because I do live on Lincoln, and it has been a real challenge. These cars are getting hit. It is on the regular. It is in the middle of the night. It wakes us up, and so it is a huge issue. I do think speed is also seems to be an issue, and there are a lot of kids on the street. A lot of kids who live on that street and neighboring streets, and they're all running around. So, you know, I think that I'm really glad to see that we're paying attention to this. I like this option. I know that some previous options included getting rid of parking on the north side of the street. That gave me concerns because it would mean more people crossing the street in the middle of the street, and I think just putting more people in danger. So in general, I do like this, but I do look forward to hearing from other folks at the table tonight.
Yeah, I'll just say, I mean, I think the idea of keeping the parking, and as much as I don't want to see the cars get hit, it adds as an additional barrier for folks that are either playing in the yard or, you know, heck, some of these cars could have, if they didn't hit an automobile, they could have hit a house. So as much as I don't want to see any of the damage to property, and that's why we're here to find an answer, a solution for it, I think that it's not going to go to zero, but anything we can do to reduce the amount of potential collision, especially at night and under the circumstances that seem to be described here, I think makes sense. I think if adding other features like speed humps and things like that might actually have a counterproductive, if it's OWI is the issue, that might actually not be a good thing, you know, losing control of the vehicle. But I think too, over time, keeping an eye on this, seeing how the bollards work. And then interesting if there's like 6 months from now in the motion, if someone makes like, hey, we put in the signs as well, and just try to delineate, you know, not trying to have too many variables in the experiment at once, and just see, you know, if it helps. I think these things are small enough cost that we should be pulling out all stops to see what we can do to make the situation safer. And I think over time too, we'll learn. And then maybe the next generation, if it isn't working, or if it is working, you know, we can double down and use this solution elsewhere. So. Commissioner Colo.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I definitely agree with everything that's being said, although I would put the signs out now for a couple of reasons. One, in item 6G today, we just learned about how some of these pinch points, because these bollards are just essentially creating the same pinch point we might have on Midseta that were just put in, but we used concrete on Midseta there to make the road a little bit smaller at the stop sign. So we kind of do know how pinch points work. We have data in this traffic report to show it. So we know kind of like the impact we see on that. I think that there's enough of an issue on the street that it is worth throwing everything we have at it right now, especially if we're not 100% sure these bollards even going up until next spring, depending on when DPS can accommodate it. You know, it's getting cold out. All the leaves might start falling tonight, tomorrow, who knows? You know, the weather is crazy. So if there's a possibility these aren't going in until next spring, I think we can put those signs in now, and the data is going to be probably about the same, because once again, we know what happens when we pinch the road. So my guess is everything that's happening could be resolved those signs.
We know on a Vincetta environment, I think the one difference, the other variable here is the fact that these are probably typically visitors to Royal Oak that are exiting towards Woodward, whereas in Vincetta, it's more neighborhood traffic, so they get patternized to that pinch point.
Yeah.
So these may not work, because they're just new to people, right? Or they may hit them. And we may find that we got to do something different. So I'm fine, whatever the commission wants to do, I'm not going to stand in the way. I think your collective wisdom is good. But, I think there's 6 of one, half dozen of the other. Well, all right, Commissioner Douglas.
Yeah, this is why we make the big bucks here. This is an intractable problem, and even the ideal, the ideal solution is still not an excellent solution. And so often we hear people say, on our street, there are accidents because of cars parked, and it's, one bumper thing in a year, and here we've got like 4 horrible crashes on this street. I think I'm happy to move forward with option B, but Commissioner Cole, and I'm not ready to put the sign up. I do appreciate the A/B testing element of this. Start with the bollards, then perhaps add the speed sign. But I'm also cognizant of what the department has said is that people ignore those. Ultimately, they become desensitized to them. But it may well be that at some point we need to budget for and put in more permanent curbing cutouts to protect these parking lanes. But option B I think is okay for now. So I'll move approval.
Well,
do we have a motion on the?
We don't have a motion on the table.
Okay, so I'll move approval of option B.
You have a motion for option B. Is there a second? Second by Commissioner Herzog. Discussion. I want to hear most from the person that lives this every single day. It's not very often we have like the expert with us, so I'm going to defer everything to Commissioner Cheatham. You tell me how to vote, my friend.
Well, I do sit on my porch a lot, not really at 3 o'clock in the morning usually, but
usually.
And unfortunately, I think my neighbor here, who I've actually not met before, but I've seen you. I think you walk your dog by my house. It sounds like his family's unfortunate expert in this situation, but I guess I would suggest to amend the motion to include adding the digital speed sign. I don't know, 4 months down the line. I don't know, 6 months down the line. 6 months down the line.
So you want to make a motion to amend the motion?
Right, to have this recommendation, but add the digital speed sign 6 months down the road.
Okay. Is there a second? Second by Commissioner Colo. Discussion? I think it's an amazing idea. All right, no other discussion? I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Okay, the amendment went in to the original motion. Is there a discussion now on the amended original motion? With none. Oh, Ms. Donahue?
I do have a question. So the resolution as presented for option B is to eliminate the diagonal legs and to do the bollards along the parking lane, which is kind of against what DPS thinks we should do here, and they are suggesting that we do the diagonal upstream end on each one. So I just want to clarify for my purposes what you're looking to install out here.
So,
can I amend my amendment?
Yes, another amendment.
Okay, so it would be to move with the bollards, but the striping only on the, what was the word you said?
Upstream.
Upstream direction, rather than what's exactly in this resolution, and then add the digital speed signage 6 months down the road.
Okay. Well, we'll do that official proposed. Seconded by Commissioner Colo. Discussion with none.
I'm not sure about that. I think the presence of the full wrap I mean, I think we need that visual deterrence, and I'm inclined to let the DPS department figure things out on their own. So just a minor point, I'm not going to support the amendment, but I'll support whatever the final motion winds up being.
Commissioner Macy?
Oh, I wasn't going to say anything, but I think I agree with that. I just feel like it's a better protector to have that just because of the way you're seeing it as it comes along. Like, of course, you see the upstream angle first, but it feels like it does indicate better what it's doing there if it also goes around that. But I mean, I leave it to, again, we have an expert at the end of the table, but that would have been my preference too, to leave it as it was and trust DPS. I mean, like I don't want to step on DPS's toes, but like, can't they just skip that little part? I mean,
Yeah.
Well, and I think, and I want Commissioner Cheatham to chime in on this, I think that it might be better to have the trapezoid there, aside from the DPS concern if they can't just move around it, only because you can kind of see it from both sides, right? So it's on your left, it's flanking on your left, it's just another alert, even if you're driving westbound, let's say it's another cue that there's something going on here, flashy things, I need to slow my backside down, you know? So if Commissioner Cheatham is okay, I know she's probably trying to be a little bit more diplomatic, but how do you feel about it?
No, I mean, that sounds great. It seems like the most that we can do here, the better. And we think if that might be a stronger, have more effect, that sounds good to me. So I withdraw my amendment to my amendment.
Well, we can, I think procedurally, we'll just vote no on it.
Okay, sounds good.
And then make another one. Well, I don't know, telling you guys.
Well, then can it just resort back to what I had before, which was just the digital sign, 6 months?
Well, if it resorts back to the one before, this recommendation actually only has the one upstream on it. So we'd have to just do another amendment to do the trapezoid. That's all.
No.
No, I think
No, we vote.
the way it's presented, Ms. Donahue?
So the first motion was basically 4 to 5 bollards along the parking lane only, no diagonals. And then that was overturned with just the upstream end. And now I think we're saying, let's not do that, let's do the full trapezoid. So maybe we just say, as shown on the exhibit, and the speed limit sign 6 months later.
Yeah.
Might be a clean
That'll
way to
easier,
say that.
Cleaner. Doesn't hurt to have an extra one on there. All right. I'll call for the vote on this amendment only. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed?
No.
No. Okay, so that amendment dies. So we have now the original with the amended with the sign, and if anyone wants to make an amendment to go back to the trapezoid as explained in the exhibit, we'll entertain that motion.
Me too.
Okay, I got it.
Yes.
Okay,
Commissioner
I
Bolt.
move that we amend the motion for the design as displayed in the exhibit,
Okay, great. Is there a second to that?
which also includes the signs, right? The signs are voted. Okay, perfect.
Those are still there.
Yep.
Yep. So,
Second.
second? By Commissioner Douglas. All right, discussion. There's just an amendment to go to the exhibit. All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion passes. So now we have a motion on the table, 2 amendments. The signs, 6 months later, and this nice exhibit here, which we'll call Exhibit Trapezoid.
Again, why we get paid the big bucks.
Tell ya, you just gotta keep track of these things. They're doing it without our Post-it notes. It's amazing.
Robert would be proud.
All right. Deanna, sorry about all this. Never filling in again. All right, any discussion on the amended motion? All right, with none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, motion passes. Super simple, super clean, super easy. We're good to go. All right, thank you, Ms. Donahue. We appreciate everything you do, your professionalism, you're willing to deal with us, and always explaining things that even a guy like me can understand. Thank you. All right, this brings us to item 9, which is consideration of ordinance to conditionally rezone 1200 Knowles Street to general industrial. First reading, Mr. Twing.
Mayor, members of the commission, you do have a recommendation from the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission reviewed this request at their September 10th meeting, and they are recommending approval of the conditional rezoning from mixed-use 1 to general industrial for the use, as well as the associated site plan that's required to be submitted with any conditional rezoning. The reason for the request from the petitioner is they are proposing to include 2 uses under the zoning ordinance that are not allowed in mixed use 1. The current use is fine as an office, but they want to add warehousing and a distribution center to the 2 existing buildings that are on site. There are no expansions of those buildings. The site plan is included in the packet as presented and recommended by the Planning Commission. There's also a suggested resolution based on the Planning Commission's action contained in the commission letter. It is a first reading, so you would see a second reading with the actual conditional rezoning agreement attached at a future meeting if you support the Planning Commission's recommendation. The petitioners are here if you have questions of them and their operation.
Questions for Mr. Twing? No questions for Mr. Twing? Oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner Colo.
Mr. Tring, so if we change this zoning today, this conditional zoning, this runs with the land, correct?
Right.
So any change to this use would be allowed in perpetuity on this land from now on?
Correct. It would change to the general industrial for the specific site plan that's attached, as well as the uses that are included in that conditional rezoning agreement. It would not open it up to other uses that are listed in the industrial zoning district. As a conditional rezoning, it is conditioned on what you have in front of you this evening.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions for Mr. Twing? Would the petitioner like to make a brief presentation?
Yes, thank you very much. Dennis Cowan with Plunkett Cooney on behalf of the petitioner. And with me is Simon Savaya, who is both the owner of the property through his LLC and also the owner of Holbrook Auto Parts, which does have offices currently at the location. So 1200 Knowles, where this is located, it's somewhat difficult to find, as I understand, even for me the first time I went there. It is somewhat geographically isolated. It is the end of the line of what used to be a general industrial area in the southern part of the city. There are 2 buildings which were built in 1989 that are on the property. They total about 9,200 square feet. It's a triangular piece of property. It's not a square. It's bordered by the railroad tracks on one side, the marijuana retailer to the north, and apartments to the east. Several years ago, the city did change the zoning in the area, including this property, to mixed use. And while we all know there have been several projects that have gone on, both conversions of buildings and new construction, there are still some industrial uses on large parcels, such as GFL's recycling facility, National Storage, and then there's a large open parking lot for new cars that I think is associated with Royal Oak Ford. Currently on site, there are 5 employees which house the general business operations for Holbrook Auto Parts. Holbrook has 9 stores? Yeah, 9 stores in Detroit and in some suburbs. That is kind of a small chain of auto parts stores, both new and used. His company is part of the Automotive Recyclers Association. There is a business, part of the business that they have is taking parts off of used cars and depolluting them and putting those parts back into circulation, and it's a more cost-effective way as opposed to paying for brand new OEM replacement parts. The use, as we have stated, is restricted. The primary need for the warehouse is a auto parts by mail sales business, which is part of what Holbrook Auto Parts does. There will be no retail sales on site. This simply will involve his trucks, which are not semis. Semis cannot get down. As you may know, it's a very narrow, what used to be Knowles, and now it's an easement. Knowles has been vacated there. So his trucks from his company, panel trucks or box type trucks would come, bring the parts, they'd be put into the warehouse, and then they would be sent out by either Federal Express, UPS, or Amazon. We anticipate there'd be 4 to 5 trucks a day coming to pick up the parts to take them to their delivery destinations. And quite frankly, knowing the way that the UPS and Amazon do it, I know there are a lot of trucks that already come through that area because of all the apartments and the residential area to the east and to the north. So I think there would not be an appreciable increase in truck traffic at all for those delivery style trucks. Again, the uses are just for warehouse, distribution, assembly, storage, packaging, and the current office. There will be we're not asking for, nor was there included in the draft of the conditional rezoning agreement, any manufacturing on the site, any industrial processes, any use of chemicals. It's simply to store the auto parts until they are sent out upon sale. So one of the items that came up in some of the conditions we've placed in the agreement, and this came up at the Planning Commission, is that the hours of operation would be 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. There would be no outdoor storage, and all waste and recycling containers will be contained within the building. We did attempt to have a neighborhood meeting, but no one showed up on a Saturday morning. It may have been because Michigan and Michigan State were playing at home, but be that as it may, we did make that attempt. We also did not have any negative comments at the Planning Commission meeting, and we did receive the unanimous support of the Planning Commission. So just 3 quick points. The property is very isolated and will not impact the redevelopment of the general area. In fact, immediately adjacent to this property, it's already been redeveloped. The marijuana facility used to be an industrial facility that was used for forklifts associated with GFL recycling. Property to the east has been turned into apartments. Even on the other side of the railroad tracks, that's already been changed. So changing this use and allowing these uses will not impact the immediate area nor the general area for redevelopment. The likelihood of this property being used for a mixed use as allowed under the ordinance is rather dim. It doesn't have any frontage on Harrison. It's about 200 feet back. You can't even see the buildings unless you're really looking for them. So any type of retail or public associated uses is probably not realistic. And as far as multifamily and talking with Krieger-Klatt, which did the site plan for Mr. Savaya, because of its odd shape, there wouldn't be the ability to place that many units on the property, and it's really not viable. Plus, it's kind of isolated, and a lot of people, including particularly women, do not like to be in an isolated area to live. So as far as apartments go. So taking that all into account and the fact that we are restricting uses, and this is a very soft use, we would respectfully ask for your approval of this conditional rezoning. The city's protected and the residents, because this agreement will be recorded against the property. Anyone buying it in the future is put on notice, and any uses other than the ones being asked for would have to come back before you, as well as any expansion of the facility of the buildings, which are, again, 9,200 square feet. So thank you very much, and we'll look forward to answering any questions between the two of us.
Any questions for the petitioner? Commissioner Colo.
Thank you. Mr. Cowan, thank you for that presentation, sir. Thank you for being here. Can you tell us a little, you mentioned about recycling and reusing auto parts. Can you tell us about that process, and is that happening here? Are the parts being repackaged here to be resold?
No, he has a yard that there'd be no process of any kind involving any kind of automobiles. He has a yard in another location that does all of that. So just the pure parts, like it would be a transmission or something of that nature, or a, electrical part, anything of that nature, those parts would just be delivered on the used basis. New parts typically come from some manufacturer and then are delivered into the warehouse.
Thank you so much.
Yep. Any other questions? Commissioner Hunt.
Thank you, Mr. Cowan. I understand that you said no chemicals will be used. Will there be
Right.
any like storage of oils or anything like that? Is it just strictly automobile
No.
parts, brakes,
He
things like
doesn't,
that?
it's just automotive parts. He doesn't sell any of that type of, doesn't sell those types of products.
Okay, so nothing that could seep, that would be
No.
environmentally dangerous?
Right, exactly. No,
Okay.
he just deals in parts.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Macy.
I think this is for Mr. Twing, although Mr. Cowan
Oh, sure.
may need to fill in. So, having heard what this does, what I understood you to say before when Commissioner Colo asked was that even though this is being rezoned industrial, it's being rezoned conditional industrial, such that if some other additional use, like the ones we're asking about, that would be like manufacturing or storing of oils or anything like that, would have to come back before us. It wouldn't pass. That part of it does, the free industrial spot doesn't pass with the property, right? Just this use.
Correct. It's limited to the items that are included in their proposal. Those items will be spelled out further in the conditional rezoning agreement, the actual document that's to be signed, both by the petitioner and by the mayor and the clerk when that's on second reading. And that'll actually be recorded at the county for future users of the site or owners of the site. So it will be limited to what's in there. If they want to change either parts of the uses or the site plan layout, it would have to come back and get your approval for those modifications.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for the petitioner or for Mr. Twing? Commissioner Colo.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm looking at the criteria for conditional rezoning, and one of them is that evidence should document the applicant cannot receive a reasonable return on investment through development as the property stands. Is there a reason why they couldn't get a reasonable ROI between that and special land use permits with the current zoning?
The only interest that Mr. Savaya has told me about is that other parties have approached him about renting it as a warehouse.
Mm-hmm.
There's been no other interest in anyone buying it or redeveloping it or anything of that nature. So we think this is, at this time, the best use for the property, and quite frankly, a use that he needs the property for. Right now, the entire back part of the building is vacant. And by the way, I didn't mention the height of the building is about 20 feet and the interior height is about 18 feet. So it was used as a warehouse in the past. I happen to know that. But also both buildings are currently, except for the front office part, are vacant because no one sees any really viable use for them other than for a warehouse.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you. We'll call you back if we have any more. All right. Motions, discussion, silence? Commissioner Colo?
Actually, I have another question for Mr. Trang. There is another condition here that should be consistent with the future land use map of the master plan. What is the future land use map on this?
Well, the adopted one, the current one, shows it is as planned for industrial. The draft master plan that was presented to the Planning Commission shows it in the mixed-use corridor designation, but that's a document that hasn't been submitted or approved yet. So what's identified here for this site in the current adopted master plan is general industrial.
Any other questions? Commissioner Douglas.
Yeah, I'll move approval on first reading here. As a planning commissioner, we scrutinized this very vigorously at the Planning Commission, asked a lot of penetrating questions, especially about operating hours. And while a conditional rezoning is a one-sided offer that we either take up or down, it does seem that in the time since it was submitted to the Planning Commission, the petitioner has modified it slightly to bake in, for example, the operating hours. I think this is a pretty benign use, and I'm happy to support it.
A motion by Commissioner Douglas. Is there a second? Second by Commissioner Hunt. All right, discussion? Mr. Colo.
Thank you. So I'm inclined, I'd be interested to hear what everyone has to say, but I'm inclined right now not to support this. Not because of the use that we're presented with today, but because of the use that we could see 10 years down the road from today. Being used as a warehouse, this is smack in the dab of a residential area. And it wasn't a residential area when this current master plan was being developed. There was probably an old lumber yard across the street. There was a recycling plant. There was a tow plant. It was a dilapidated, the south side of town there was really run down, and that has changed drastically in the 24 years since the last master plan came out. And in the new master plan, it is hit as mixed use, which includes residential, retail, offices. And of the 2 years of the master plan process we've been going through, that's actually one item that's never come up is what the future land use map looks like. There's been some argument about the terminology that should go into it, but there's been no argument about the mixed use at all from the numerous public, I think there's something like 37 public comment events and something like 12,000 comments received, and none have actually mentioned the land use map. So sure, it's not the current one, but it is where we're going. But that being said, this is a neighborhood and it's going to continue to develop into a neighborhood and be a stronger neighborhood. And I'm just worried about what happens when Holbrook Auto maybe outgrows this and a new distributor comes in who has more intensive warehousing uses. Someone operating a forklift in the middle of a neighborhood is just really incompatible with their neighborhood preservation. So I'm inclined not to support this right now.
Yeah, I'll just say, we talked about this at planning. I think it's a fair point. The way I walk it in my mind is right now at this point in time, there hasn't been any other, higher and better uses proposed in terms of folks wanting to come and redevelop it, given where it's at. I think that the size of the warehouse, the amount of traffic associated would actually be kind of de minimis for the area, in terms of what you could actually do as throughput for that area. And I think as the area starts to evolve, I would put money on it that the owner at some point in time will be like, wow, I can go buy another warehouse somewhere else and at lower cost and closer to the highway and all of that, and sell this for residential development or something like that when that time comes. And I think that would be the highest and best use when that happens. So I think it's a concern, but I think that based on where this is exactly located, we kind of vetted that, or at least I did in my mind at planning, and I feel like it makes sense. And the conditional part of it is, they can't come in and all of a sudden start doing manufacturing, right? They can only operate it, store some parts, and move those parts out a couple days. We talked to the owner, and there's a FedEx truck in there, a UPS truck here and there. Probably less than some of our houses during the holiday season in terms of how many folks are pulling into the driveway and stopping. So I think it's a fair question. I just think when we looked at it at planning in a lot of detail, that was, at least in my mind, where I felt comfortable supporting it. So yes, Commissioner Coleman.
Mr. Mayor, I respect that completely. The one thing I think of is there was mention that there is a pot store in front of it, and there's only a pot store in front of it because that was an industrial use. It was zoned industrial, so that became a suitable spot. And I would bet that if that wasn't zoned industrial, no one would have supported changing it to be industrial to put that use there at the time. So by leaving this creating a spot zone industrial in an area that is not industrial. So I'm just worried about not the use today, but the use tomorrow and the use thereafter. So sure. That's kind of where I stand.
Okay. Anybody else? Commissioner Herzog?
I have the same concerns that Commissioner Colo has. In what we're trying to do with the draft master plan is to be future focused, and so I don't know, future looking, that this is going to be that. And I just agree with some of the points being in that area and how that area is kind of redeveloping. I'm kind of on the fence on if this should go back in with this conditional industrial.
Mr. Hunt?
I would have to say I completely understand the arguments made by Commissioner Colo and Commissioner Herzog, but the proposed master plan is proposed. Right now, I think we have to operate under the master plan that we have, which would allow for this type of zoning. And what you stated, Mr. Mayor, we haven't had a better offer for this. This is bringing a business to that area. It's bringing life to that piece of property. And I think we would be dealing in speculation as to what we would be able to get down the road. Right now, we have a tangible project that's before us that seems to be good for that area. It's tucked away. Nobody's really knows that it's back there. I tried driving past it. I had to drive past it 3 times before I could even find it. And I don't think it necessarily interferes with people in the apartments next to them that's being able to enjoy their property. So I would still support this.
Commissioner Cheatham?
Yeah, I'm in support of it. I walked my dog there as well, so I could find it. And it's set back, and there is housing next to it, but the housing that's next to it the front faces the other direction, and there's a fence. So there really is quite a bit of separation between them. I had the concern, and I had asked our city manager the question about conditional zoning and making sure, because certainly, even if it's the back of your house, if there's some sort of pollutants there, you don't want that. So, with understanding that the conditional rezoning was only for these purposes, only for storing these particular items, I feel comfortable with it. I think that this is a business owner in our city right now, and can support his business at this time. And if he gets a better option to sell off in several years and it's housing, that's great. But right now, that seems like a good use for it. So I'm in support.
Anybody else? All right, we got a motion on the table. We do, right? I have it marked here. Sometimes I get ahead of the game. Okay, good. All right, I'll call, as long as there's no other discussion, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed?
No.
Okay, motion passes 5-2. Thank you very much. All right, thank you. Good luck. All right, that brings us to the last regularly scheduled agenda item, which is the calendar going into next year. So it looks like a pretty typical calendar we've endured. I mean, I think for some of us, the spring break in March, it says Monday the 24th, but I think for Royal Oak, it's the 31st we start. So that clears the week. However, Royal Oak is out on an island this year because my wife, who is a school teacher in Waterford, has hers the week before. So that's we're gonna have a complex discussion in our household when it comes to where we go and who goes. She might be happy. She might be like, I'm gone. I'm going on a trip by myself somewhere.
You're not going to the island this year.
Yeah, that's gonna be, we got some pictures back too.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's gonna be a good 6 months before that damage gets fixed.
Yeah.
Mr. Colo, or Commissioner Colo.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My only comment would be, earlier this year, it was actually February 29th, we did a Thursday meeting when we were doing back-to-back meetings. The second meeting, instead of being on a Monday, we did it on a Thursday, just I believe because of the election. I wonder if anyone would be interested. We have 2 second meetings that we move forward on this calendar. It might be nice to put those at the end of the second week, just a space. I think that gives us a little bit of space between meetings and might help staff a little too.
Well, I want to listen from staff what they believe in that recommendation. Is it better just to keep them on Mondays, given the fact that you have other committee meetings and other staff meetings and deliverables, and that you just kind of use it as try to plan the loads accordingly? What's your thoughts on it, Mr. Ballweber?
I don't think I think I would leave it at because of the normal schedule of having them on a Mondays. Certainly, if it looks as you're getting closer to it, you can change it at that point if it was necessary to do. We did make an effort, I will just say this isn't actually on point, to check various holidays as well, and there's only one next year that would be affected by that. But again, I think if you go ahead with the schedule as presented, I think that's fine. And if it turns out we're getting overloaded closer to that time,
you could consider moving to a Thursday, I think, at that point. But we try to keep the second set, if it's too close, light like that, up too.
You want my opinion?
Yes, Mr. Grochowski. I mean, do I want it? But I'll take it.
I think it's a suggestion worth exploring. Having two back-to-back, less than like 7 days apart, does pose challenges from staff. Getting that second agenda, you've noticed when we've done that in the past, that second agenda is usually extremely light because it just gives us very little time to get anything of substance on there for you to do. I thought that experiment you did earlier this year with that Thursday meeting, I thought that was well received, and it did give us a little more buffer to get that. So it would certainly be worth exploring, I think, whether you do that now or in the future. But I think that does help us internally for sure, give you a more consistent agenda, whereas that first meeting you'll be overloaded, you'll have nothing the second one, and then you'll have another busy agenda after that. So that's how I read it, at least. And I thought when we did it earlier this year, it was a positive feedback, as far as it was interesting to have one or two on a Thursday for a change. But if you're good with Mondays, or good with Mondays, and we can deal with it and try to plan accordingly. But it is helpful.
So we'd be looking at for the May and for the December meetings, correct?
Just those two, yes. I think that was the
So,
suggestion.
so Commissioner Colo, if we did it, the second meeting moves forward in May, so instead of doing Monday the 19th, would you suggest we would do
The 22nd.
Thursday the 22nd?
Correct.
And then that following weekend's Memorial Day weekend. That Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday.
That is a potential problem, though, isn't it?
Memorial Day weekend is the 23rd, 4th, 5th.
Yeah.
There's no school on the 23rd.
Yeah, so a lot of folks will be heading out. Do you kind of want to, I mean, we can, as long as we do a couple months, I mean, I hear, like, I think we can see what our workload is.
Yeah.
And
We'll figure it out.
yeah, maybe it's the Thursday after, you know what I mean, Memorial Day.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I think we kind of take a look and see what's going on at the time. And can we empower staff to make that recommendation to us? Can we leave that up to you guys to say, hey, look, you're going to have one of these, wonky peak and valley situations, and also too for petitioners, you know what I mean? People want to get their projects done. They want to get their things approved. If they got to wait 3 weeks from a planning commission, if the timing's off, that's, tough for people. And so the more you can have 2-week breaks, I agree. So what we'll do then is just maybe, I hope you're not here, Mr. Wallenweber, in May.
But I'll
Find out tomorrow, I guess. But Mr. Grochowski, if you can put a note in your calendar, like to kind of look like in the March, April timeframe, what you think it's going to look like, and then put a hint to the city manager at the time, and then we at one of the meetings, as long as we give the public enough heads up as well, too. Commissioner Macy.
Something completely different, and I don't think we should make any changes based on this right now, but just something to be thoughtful about is that there's a package of bills in front of the state legislature that would move the start dates of elected officials, local officials, to December 1st, starting next year. So I don't know, I can't even, our charter has it on the second meeting or something like that. I don't know what it is.
Of November?
Of November.
Yeah. That's what it is, but this will supersede that, and it will now be December 1st. I don't know if that means that we thus want a meeting on December 1st or not. Anyway, I'll leave that to Nick and to others to think about as we get closer to that, and if the bill package passes, but I do think it's going to.
Interesting.
Do you think it's going to?
I do think it's going to.
It's interesting because we always try to avoid lame duck, and that's why we moved ours to November, right? Yeah. Well, it used to be out, I think, like the second week of December is when we normally did the transition, if I'm not mistaken, like first or second week of December. And then we moved it to November because you had folks that were just checked out. You know what I mean? And you risked saying if you had a turnover, you know, a bunch of people that lost the election, let's say on the board, they're like, well, let's just pass a bunch of stuff. You know what I mean? And that's not helpful to anybody either. Okay, so that's another note to make note of in your notes. Did you note that?
So I'm hearing is there's a consensus to move forward as presented, but with some.
Yeah, a little bit of checkpoints.
Checkmarks in
Some
there.
Yeah.
tickles in your calendar.
Yep, some asterisks.
Right.
Motion, move.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Colo. Is there a second? Second by Commissioner Hunt. Discussion on the calendar for next year. All right. With none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion passes. All right, that brings us to our final item, which is adjournment. Commissioner Cheatham?
Aren't we supposed to vote on a change for this calendar?
Oh,
On what?
There were two proposed.
Yep.
So
we did the calendar for next year, and
but
then there was...
changing the second November meeting this year?
Yep, that's a good catch. Where do I see that on here?
It's like sort of in the middle of the thing. It's just underneath the resolution.
Bottom of page 308.
Bottom of page 308.
Do you
Why
want me
is
to read it and see?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I missed that.
Yeah, that paragraph down there.
Maybe I'll just make a motion.
Yeah.
I'll move the second November meeting to November 18th,
Okay.
2024, instead of its original date.
Okay, motion made, second by Commissioner Herzog. Discussion? All right, with none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, motion passes. All right. Now, is anyone ready to adjourn?
Nah.
Nobody? Commissioner Cheatham.
I'm on fire. I'll move to adjourn.
We have a motion to adjourn. Is there a second? Enthusiastically seconded by Commissioner Herzog. Any discussion on this motion? All right, with none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, motion passes. We're adjourned.